So it'd been about a handful of years after I graduated with my undergraduate degree that I had the epiphany. And I always get excited about my epiphanies because they lead me on to great and wonderful and unusual and interesting things that usually end up with a story. At this point, I'd been floundering for all those years after I graduated with one small job after another. And my epiphany was I would go back to school to become an art teacher. Made perfect sense to me. So I wrote the application letter and I sent it off, and I've always lived a rather charmed life. Most of the things I do, I get accepted to. So I was all excited. I couldn't wait for that letter. And it was probably a month later, I opened the envelope and I wasn't prepared for the response. It said, no, rejected. I was heartbroken because deep inside, I always knew that I would be a teacher. I knew that that was part of my story. That was the next chapter. About a month later, I get a phone call. We'd like you to come in for an interview. I'm thinking, really? You want to interview me for a position in your program that you previously rejected me for? So I said, okay, why not? I went in for the interview. And I decided, you cannot reject me twice. You're going to get the undistilled version of me. So I'm sitting in the interview and I'm talking about, well, I used to work in the basement of National Geographic. I worked at the Library of Congress. I worked at National Museum of American History. I worked with adults who had developmental disabilities. And I worked with juvenile delinquents at a wilderness school in Dillwyn, Virginia. I went on telling them about all my experiences at the table, my two interviewers sitting across from me, and they were very attentive, they listened. And then I thought, I got to tell them more about these kids I worked with. I said, they were really kind of rough around the edges. Now, I don't always exercise good judgment, and this was one of those cases. So I'm sitting at the table, and I say, these kids, they were between 12 and 17, and half a dozen of them had tattoos, FTW, on their arm. Well, much like when you give a dog a new command, they turned their heads sideways because they didn't seem to know what FTW meant. I offered clarity. Fuck the world. They both jerked back as if somebody hit the brakes in a car. Fine with me. I went home and I felt good. This was me. This was my story, and I was sharing it with them. 2 weeks before the school semester started, I received my acceptance letter. Wow. I found great success. Class after class, it was just straight A's. Maybe that's what grad school is like. Everything went really, really well. I went to my student teaching experiences. First one went brilliantly. Second one, they brought in someone that didn't know me. And that person didn't like the way I did things. And before I knew it, I was sitting back in that same office with the head of this art ed program. And she said, it's just not working out. And I'm thinking, really? And she said, we'd like you to come back next semester. I told her point blank it would be less painful to shoot myself in the foot. That might not have been the best choice of words, but then she offered insult to injury. She decided she would ask me, well, what are you going to do next? And I said, well, I'm going to teach. And she said, no, you're not. Nobody would want you. Even Baltimore City wouldn't want you, even if they were desperate. I was crushed. I was crushed. It was a sucker punch, and I didn't deserve that. In hindsight, I probably should have brought a lawyer to that meeting. I don't think it would have ended the same way. I left. 3 months later, I received a job offer from Montgomery County Public Schools, which is the most coveted county in Maryland. Woohoo! I had the opportunity to teach there, and I feel so lucky at the opportunity of all the different successes I've seen from my former students. I have one that flies on Air Force One photographing the president. So it was kind of a big deal. 5 years later, I decided I'm going to confront my demons. I went back to the college and I said, what's it going to take for me to get this paper? They said, well, give us some paperwork substantiating that you've been teaching. And I did. And 2 months later, they sent me my degree in the mail. And that degree read the same month and the same year that I should have graduated. They post-dated it. And I looked at it and I thought, there is no next time. It's always this time. And that's my story.